right. It is another Tuesday, and here we are. I hope you guys are doing great. It's Thanksgiving week, so we have a lot going on. I think a lot of people are not doing shows this week, so I've heard. And so we are going to do kind of I don't know if I want to say fun one, but kind of different than what we usually do. If you're new to this show, this is a true crime podcast. You can watch it every week on Tuesdays, 8, 7 Central on YouTube on the Andrea Up Late channel. And tonight, I am graced with the presence of Beth from the Bar is Open with Beth and Greg podcast. Let's get her on the stage here. There she
Hello.
is.
Howdy, how are
Hey,
you?
hey, I'm doing good, girl. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me on. This is going to be fun.
of course. I always enjoy doing shows with you guys. And so you and I have not done one together before. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. This is fun. This is my first solo podcast, so after this I should be a pro now, right?
I think for sure. I think you've already got pro status. So this just confirms that you're doing great. I mean, if like I might set you back a notch, but otherwise
Nah, don't be
you've got
silly.
it going on. I've seen all your stuff. You guys can go follow Beth on, like I said, on the Bar is Open with Beth and Greg podcast. She and Greg both do a whole thing, so you can find them on their own handles. But they do the Castro files. Do you want to tell a little bit about what you guys have going on?
Yeah, so we have the bars open, which is just Greg and I chit-chatting about stuff going on in the world, right? And then the Castro Files is all things paranormal for our love for paranormal. And then Greg and Peter just started a new one. They're getting ready to drop a couple called Baldy and the Big Guy, which should be a lot
Nice.
of fun. I've not seen one yet, but I could hear them from downstairs when they were recording, and I think it's going to be a pretty good laugh. So
Okay.
lots of stuff going on. Yeah.
Oh, right on. So you guys go follow them and everything they do, because it's always good stuff. I always enjoy like tuning into them and being in the chats there. They're kind of like this show. We have some similarities of people in the chats. It's a good time. So if you aren't a part of it on YouTube, you can always like and subscribe to either one of our shows, and it's free to do so. And it's fun to kind of get in with some people that are, consistently doing the thing. So we all kind of have gotten to quote know each other as much as you can through internet and whatever.
Long
But you'll see the
distance.
same
Yeah.
faces, right? And it's a lot of fun, and we get to make some friendships in that kind of way. So it's a good time, right? Would you say so,
Yes.
Beth?
I
Yeah,
absolutely have a lot of good friends that have come from these shows, so it's fun that
yeah,
way.
for sure, for sure. And if you have a business or whatever, a business,
Venice,
people,
Venice.
yeah, there's a lot of networking going on. So yeah, it's a good time. But tonight, I brought Beth on to do a little bit of a ladies' night. We haven't done this in a while. And so we're going to do a case on Omaima Nelson. So, you guys, if you are a Night Shift follower, if you have watched Night Shift with Andrea Up Late, my very first episode was over a year and a half ago. So now I'm on to what I would call season 2. But on season 1, my first episode was a Catherine Knight case. She was a woman out of Australia who did all sorts of things with her husband and had quite a history. And Beth and Greg, actually, I did the case and then followed up with them and then talked about that case on their show as well. Another reason to bring Beth in on this one. But this case tonight is a little reminiscent of that, but with a little bit of different twists and turns, if you will, right? So we can go on and get started talking about Omaima Nelson. So Omaima, her name is spelled Omaima. She is from Egypt, so it's a bit of a different name than we're used to saying. I told BC earlier, Beth, that I'm going to say Obama all night because it looks like it when I read it. It's Omaima, not Obama, for anyone
I was
listening.
gonna
But
say
Omaima
Obama.
Nelson, it's
So
not about Obama at all. And in all fairness, was born
funny.
in Egypt in 1968. So she grew up in Cairo. She lived with her parents and siblings, but we learned that her father was said to have been pretty extremely abusive, physically and sexually, to Omaima and to her mother. So we're not quite sure what she witnessed. We don't have a lot of accounts of all of that, but we know that her childhood was super tough. When Omaima was 6 years old, um, her father performed. Okay, it's going to get heavy for a minute, but then we'll kind of get out of that. But her father performed genital mutilation on her, also known as female circumcision. So if you've not heard about this, it's where a procedure is done that removes at the very least, removes the clitoris from a female child. It's done without any anesthesia, any pain medication, often with definitely not sterilized and most likely not even clean instruments. There are like 4 stages of this procedure. So, in terms of severity, I don't know which stage Omaima had done. It doesn't really matter, but it can often lead to where they actually close the vaginal wall with sutures and different things.
Wow.
Um, Legs are bound, right? So ultimately, the whole procedure is done as anywhere from toddlerhood up to childhood to then render right the results that will last their lifetime. So meaning that once they're adults, you have obviously like sexual intercourse, um, even their menstrual periods. Things are everything that is natural to a woman is going to be more difficult than it needs to be. And the ultimate idea of doing this is to render any kind of sexual activity unpleasurable for the woman. But they, like I said, they do this for when they're girls, when they're very young. So that's the very heavy portion. If you don't know much about it, as much as I hate it so much, I would almost say to look into it just so that you're aware, because it's good to be aware of things that are, even if they're unpleasant, because this is one thing that like it's always bothered me since I've known about it. It's pretty terrible. So we do have people in the United States, for instance, that um, counsel these women, or like they have to, like be a part of medical personnel that understand these, like the scar tissue, the things that have happened to them right prior, to understand what this looks like once it comes to childbirth and things like that, because it can really change some things there. So just know that Omaima went through this at 6 years old by her father.
Crazy.
Okay. So that's that. So let's get out of that. But eventually her parents divorced and her mom moved them to a different portion of Cairo referred to as Necropolis. So it was called this because there were actually less living people than there were dead. There was a cemetery basically built around the whole city. So they kind of lived like in the slums and really just like with cemeteries all around. So she lived in poverty, but her mom had gotten out of this abusive relationship with her own husband to her own, daughter and maybe other siblings. But that's where they were. So when Omaima was 18, she met an American oil worker on a contract in Cairo. So they kind of start a relationship, and then her parents kind of catch wind of this relationship. And once they catch wind of it, they decide that Omaima needs to marry him. He was full board. He was like, yep, that's fine. I'm going to take her. We'll go back to the States. Let's go. And actually, Omaima was fine with it because she finally had kind of a ticket to get out of this
Get away.
situation she was in. Right. To finally get away. So it was kind of her golden ticket. So he's happy. She's happy. Her parents kind of force it. And in fact, kind of another piece of the puzzle was that Omaima was now no longer a virgin. So she didn't think that she would have any standing with any of the Muslim men there in her town, right? So she was like, she didn't really think she had a choice, but she also wanted the ticket to get out. So she was all right with this. So they go on to go. But this was a very short-lived relationship, and she and this guy get a divorce less than a year later. So now she's in America. She's 18. Like it was 1986. She was 18. He was from Texas. She made her way to California, but she was alone in a new country. So her English was broken. She had to figure out how to survive. She was able to kind of rely on the company of men to get by, if you will. She did have some relationships. Some were casual, some a bit more serious. She did spend a little bit of time as a nanny and a model, although if you were to look at some of the pictures, most of the pictures, like, when they say she was like, when you look up a lot of reports about her, they'll say that she was an Egyptian model, but these photos she was beautiful. I mean, she absolutely could have been a model, but the photos were more of, like, her in a bikini, like, on someone's couch, right? Like
Modeling what?
yeah, like,
What
just
was
kinda, like, creepy, yeah, she had the potential, but it's like she wasn't really, like, no one professional was picking that up, right? Like, not that they couldn't have, but they didn't, so I don't know, the word model is kind of a weird one on that, but either way, she didn't spend a lot of time doing that. I think she spent most of the time, like, just kind of trying to find, um, relationships or whatever that would kind of, keep her afloat, if you will.
support her?
So, finally, in 1991, she's in California, right? She's in Bakersfield, and she met a man named Bill Nelson while she was playing pool in a bar. All right, so Bill had been a pilot, but in 1984, he had gotten hemmed up on some drug charges. And we have to remember the time and how things have changed, right? So it was 84 in California. When I say that he went to federal prison for drugs, it's not what you might think. It was marijuana at the time, right? Because things have changed. That was what was the big deal in the moment. And he was smuggling marijuana. Evidently, he was flying electronics illegally from here to Mexico as well. So he served a few years in prison, about 4 years, and he was released on parole. And that's when he met Omaima. He eventually got a job at a mortgage company, and they only knew each other for a few days. Y'all, they were like acquaintances for like 3 weeks and got married.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I mean, you can say when you know, but
I mean, yeah,
I
but
mean,
maybe a little longer than 3 weeks.
yeah, maybe you don't know in 3 weeks, right? So at this time, Bill was 56, and Omaima was 33. So they went on to have a honeymoon where she got to do like a tour de family. They went to Arkansas and Texas to meet Bill's family, and at this time, this wasn't received too well because Bill had children, and one or two of his children were actually older than his new wife, right?
Hmm.
So this was not received very well, particularly, I would assume, based on the limited amount of time that they were together prior to their marriage, right?
Right.
So their marriage lasted under a month. Oh, Mima, excuse me, would later claim that Bill was sexually assaulting her and he demeaned her in the bedroom. But on Thanksgiving night in 1991, everything kind of changed. This night came and went, and an investigation came into Bill's disappearance. So he didn't show up to work. Workers start, we talk every week, right? We talk about this. So workers start calling in, family members call in. No one can find Bill. It's right after Thanksgiving holiday. No one has seen him. And so accounts come that Omaima reached out to two former boyfriends that she had for help. Evidently, she went to one of their houses and offered him $75,000 to dispose of a mess that she had made. But he called the police. So the mess, in fact, is this. So this is from LA Times. It says, in quote, there were suitcases. This is once responders came to the house, right? There were suitcases and plastic bags soaked with dark liquid from body parts. In the fryer cooker, there sat Mr. Nelson's hands. And when we opened the refrigerator, there was Mr. Nelson's head with stab wounds. She had his entrails in his Corvette, and she was trying to get an ex-boyfriend to yank out the dentures from the head so she could dump it in the back bay. More to come on that part a little bit later. However, much of Mr. Nelson's body was still missing. During the later trial, it was described as 130 pounds of the man's body. I think that they said that when Bill went missing, he was about 230 pounds at the time. And they were missing 130 pounds of Bill. And it says, do you know where he might have gone? So when they actually when they got in touch with Omaima, she said, "Oh, no," like, that same night, right? So, like, her ex-boyfriend calls authorities saying, like, "Oh, no, I'm supposed to help get rid of all these remains or do this thing. I'm calling you guys." So they get up with her, and she's in a traffic stop, and she says, "Oh, no, Bill's on a work conference in Florida right now. I haven't seen or talked to him in days." So that was her first response to law enforcement, was that he was in Florida, right? So they sorted through her bag, her car, all the stuff. That's when they started finding all of his body parts that I just mentioned. So they found in his own Corvette his body parts in the freezer. His head was wrapped in tinfoil. We found out later that she wanted to freeze it so it would be easier to knock the teeth out of it. That's why
Wow.
they found his hands in the deep fryer, as to get rid of fingerprints, per her at the time. So her story changes multiple times, but there is a time when she says, like, yeah, I did this, and this is why. But as the trial goes on later, right? So they're able to immediately hem her up on this. But when the trial goes on, she does not have any recollection of doing these things. So that's what we're about to talk about. So in January of 1993, she was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 28 years to life at Central California Women's Facility. Um, oh my goodness. So the defense will claim. So we have prosecutorial stuff, right? Like, we have, she's saying she did it, whatever. But the defense will claim that she was in abusive relationships, and as a result, she had battered woman syndrome. They will say that she had PTSD from her upbringing. She will say she was under severe stress at the time, because she will say that Bill was actually sexually and physically abusive to her. She said that he pimped her out. She said that they would get into, like, BDSM stuff, and he would demean her. And in fact, she said that he would rape her. And her claim is that he raped her that day on Thanksgiving. And that's what caused her to then turn around and do the things that she did to him. She also told a court psychiatrist that she prepared his ribs with barbecue sauce, put them in the oven, and declared, quote, "It's so sweet." And we know that also with that interview with the psychiatrist, she declared putting on a red dress, red shoes, and a red hat before she cooked his ribs. And she said, "I did it just like in a restaurant. It's so sweet. It's so delicious. I like mine tender." That psychiatrist did say later that she was in a psychotic state when she ate Bill, and added that in 20 years of his practice, he had never experienced a conversation with a subject so bizarre, quote, "so psychotic." She was last up for parole in 2011. The courtroom had the walls lined with pictures of the crime scene, which include photos of his deep fried hands, frozen head, and skinned torso.
Can you
She
imagine?
also castrated him. She had multiple parts of his body in the freezer. His head had been in a pot, but then she froze it later. Um, she has remarried since she's been in prison to a man in his 70s, and she actually uses that as part of her defense in appeals to say that, so evidently she got remarried to a man while she's been in prison, and she's been denied parole a couple of times, but she is able to get conjugal visits with this man up to 3 days in a row, which I feel like is pretty lenient.
Yeah.
And she will use to her defense that they have conjugal visits in a place that has a kitchen with knives. And that if she were to kill again, she could have done it because there were knives in this kitchen for her visits, and she hasn't done it. So
Interesting.
that's kind of her defense. And she has literally said the words, quote, "I'm sorry, I dismembered him." She now states that she did not eat him. So all the things I said a minute ago, she will now say that she didn't do.
I can't decide
So,
if she's crazy or not. I honestly, I go back and forth.
well, so do you mean crazy, or is this a nature versus nurture? Like, right? Like,
I feel like some of it maybe, but I also feel like she's worked on her responses. You know,
right.
like It's so sweet. Who says that when they're like, first of all, who eats the person they killed? Like a lot of people, I suppose, because they're crazy. But I just, and then, but admits that to somebody. And, I know it's a psychiatrist and they have a great way of getting you to talk, but I feel like some of it was rehearsed crazy, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense, and people do, but I feel like if you're rehearsing crazy and you're gonna say that, then would you come back later to say,
Change your mind.
"Right, like, I don't remember eating him, I didn't eat him." Like, unless you think that would work better for your appeal, I guess, you know? I think a few things. So the more I've looked into, and you guys, I'll be fair, this is a Thanksgiving week, so this was not a case that, if you listen to Night Shift, we usually have like unsolved or like something with, we're following a strict timeline and there's a lot of detail in the cases. This one's done, solved. It happened a long time ago. It's just a story to tell. I was excited to have Beth on. I'm going to talk to you guys in the chats here in a minute, but so it's a little bit of a week in that sense. But you know, I don't know. I think that the more I look into the husband, I'm not sure he was necessarily on the up and up either. He could have been a great guy. There are some other accounts to where I think that he might have not been super great to her. However, I will tell you this. She talks about him doing these things to her on Thanksgiving Day. However, the headboard had two beams. They weren't very strong beams, to be fair. They looked like kind of like plywood, but they were broken. Like, so in the crime scene photos, these are broken off of the bed, which I guess if it was just a crazy Thanksgiving night, maybe so. But the fact that it ended with his death, and then she said that he had been abusing her, but he's the one dead and dismembered, and in fact, his ankles, once they recovered them, in these multiple bags of body parts, had, ligature marks on them, so it looked like his ankles had actually been handcuffed to something, and his wrist had been as well.
Wow.
Now, there are reports that she, if we're gonna be in full disclosure, had, assaulted a prior ex-boyfriend before, so she will use the fact that Bill was into BDSM and, abused her with it. Like, she kind of liked it, but then he would abuse her with it.
You take it too
Re
far.
report right, but then we have reports from her ex-boyfriend prior to Bill, who broke up with her and then would say, "No, no, no, she, like, tied me up and put a gun to my head for my money."
Wow.
So then there's that. So the prosecution will say that she is someone who would prey on older men than her, kind of subscribe to their weaknesses, tie them up, take their money, kind of thing. Uh, so she uses that, in fact, as the opposite, right? Like that's what he was doing to her, but he, in fact, is the one with the ligature marks on his wrist and ankles. However, when she went to her ex-boyfriends, to tell him to call the cop, or to tell him to, excuse me, hide the body and help her out or whatever, and he called the cops. When they get there and they first start talking to her, she has bruises and lacerations all over her as well. So she has bruises on her breast, arms, legs, lacerations everywhere. It's hard to say. I mean, okay, so there was another instance where she was accused of shoplifting in a store not too long prior to this. And when she was confronted by a female store employee about shoplifting, she attacked her. They get in a scuffle, and then she bites the store employee's nipple almost off.
Oh, Lord.
I know.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Part of me thinks like, because when you said she took advantage of older men, do you think it was because of what her dad did to her?
Of
Like,
course,
yeah,
but I
she
don't think
got
that
them
it's
in the role
articulated, or I
playing.
don't think it's conscious. Like, that's what
Right.
I'm saying. Like, yeah, I think she did a lot of messed up stuff, and I think it's a lot of her messed up history playing out, but I don't think
Right.
it's her thinking, "I'm doing this because
Because of,
XYZ." Like,
yeah.
I think her brain has been rewired since childhood. So that was the second part of the story. That's what I was gonna go into, exactly that. Like, that's a great segue. Like, we, often talk about the why behind stuff here, on Night Shift, and it's like there's not always a reason, and sometimes the reason doesn't matter. You still shouldn't do what you did, but not everything In fact, most things are not black and white, right? Um, and I think in this case, this is a perfect example. Like, she did something, she never denied doing it. She later said she didn't eat him, but she never denied doing all of these things. So she did it. She shouldn't have done it, but also your brain can get rewired. Like, hormones change a teenager's. I'm dealing with that right now. My teenager doesn't hardly talk to me this past week. Like, right? Like, hormones can change your brain. That's the
Right.
very least of it. That's just a natural process. That's what's supposed to happen. That's okay, right? So trauma that coincides with things, trauma in early adolescence, as an early childhood, and in toddlerhood, right? Like, all of these things are going to rewire our brains. That doesn't mean everyone's going to turn out to mutilate, and cook the body of someone. But
Right.
it stands to reason that it could make sense that she lost it.
Yes, that's what yes. I think that because he maybe got too rough with her that night or degraded her too much or kept pushing the limit that she was ready for, it took her back to a place that maybe she didn't
I
like.
feel like you have lesser limits at that point, right? Like, I mean, I feel like your threshold for limits are much more shallow if your brain has been rewired to actual abuse,
Right.
particularly from your father, from the first man that you know.
Interacted with,
Like,
right.
right? Like, I don't know. So, yeah, of course, she shouldn't have done this. It's terrible. But also, it's like the more and more, like, maybe this is something I should give up as a hobby, is doing true crime podcast. But it's like the more I read this stuff, the more I'm like, well, it's not so crazy to me that you did that.
Well,
Like,
I
I don't,
mean, think about her whole life. Like, it wasn't like one thing happened to her, right? Like, her dad abused her sexually and
yeah,
physically, mutilated her body, was, abusive to her mom. So, this is what she's seen her whole life till they finally get away. And who knows what was happening in their world when mom was trying to make a living? How was she making
of
a
course,
living? What kind
of
of people,
course.
So
Well,
I
and
see
we
what you're
haven't even
saying. Like,
talked about the
it's
separate
not
trauma
right.
of the trauma of what happened to her versus also the trauma of seeing something happen to her mother, which is something
Mhm.
entirely different too. That's a whole separate kind of trauma that that she endured as well. Like, uh either one on their own could potentially rewire your brain. I'm gonna look
Exactly.
a little bit at the chats, because tonight is a night I can do that. That's not always the case. Let's see what we got here. We got Silly Mander in the house, Meat Potato, Carly and Beignet. Hey guys, we got Disruptors with BC and Ski here. Meat Potato says a lot of kinks
Mhm.
stem from past behaviors or experience. From my research and experience, like impact plays sometimes comes from the past experience of abuse. Yes, I mean, I think that that's what we're talking about. It's all a cycle. Like, what you've experienced is what you then experience, right?
Right.
We see that with, even if it doesn't evolve into a gruesome murder, we see abuse take place,
Right.
even if it's, let's say, physical abuse, from father to son, and then that son to his son. These things kind of make their way of happening down. So when your whole brain is rewired from being held down and actually cut on and mutilated, and then on top of that, sexually abused and all the things, I mean, like, come on. Don't tell me
Mhm.
that she's supposed to turn out and be just like, it's all peaches and cream over here. We're all good. There,
Right, but
there's
I
n-
like how you said it doesn't always end in a gruesome murder.
no,
Like,
correct.
I think it depends. I don't know. I think it probably depends a little bit on each person's mental stability. Some have stronger stability than others. Myself, I know some days I have stronger mental stability
Of
than I
course.
do other days. So it's. I wonder if there was just a point where she just,
Right.
it had never
I'll
happened, and then she flipped out, and it just snapped, and she went the extreme.
Right. And maybe, and I have, one of these days I'll talk to her and see if I can either have her on the show or if she'll let me say her name. But I've got a dear friend that I've had for, at this point, we're going on 20 years. And she, was a child born in Russia who, at 9 years old, was put in an orphanage in Russia. And as anyone can imagine, at 9 years old, you're put in an orphanage.
Mhm.
Her It's not that both of her parents were dead, and in fact, at that point, I think that they were both alive, they just weren't in a place to care for her, but she had experienced a lot in that 9 years and, was put in an orphanage. We've all heard the stories, and so she wasn't a toddler, right? She was 9. She was a well-knowing child at that point,
Mhm.
put in an orphanage. She will tell stories of walking snow-covered woods in the middle of the night and coming back. It wasn't strict in the sense that, like, in fact, it should have been probably more strict that she was able to do these things. So all of the things that happened to her, like, prior to being put in the orphanage, and then being there, and canning homegrown mushrooms that could have led to all kinds of disease and bad things, like all the things, and then eventually got adopted to a family in America as an early teenager, and grew up. And my point is, th- the traumas that our brains endure, versus what you she's got 2 degrees, she's got a beautiful family, she's this chick is strong-willed as any. If you want the truth, you call her, because she'll tell you her
How it
full
is.
fact opinion on
Yeah.
what's going on with you. Don't call her if you wanna be coddled on whatever you feel sorry for yourself about, right? But, like, but she's got it, and she'll shoot it straight every time. So in terms of, like, yes, what you just said, like, how trauma can result in different things. It doesn't mean that this all, if you've had this background, it doesn't mean this is what your life's going to turn into. I
Right.
guess my point is that this woman did these things, but also, goodness gracious, I can't say I fully blame her either. Like, because we know that her brain's been rewired in a certain kind of way, right? Like, you know, um,
Yes. Yeah.
mm,
Here's the thing, all the way around, it's a tragedy. It's a
of course,
tragedy for the way she was brought up. It's a tragedy for the man and his
for
family that
his
he killed. It's
family.
a
Yeah.
tragedy for her and how now she's in jail for the rest of her life. So
So she's
it's
next
it's
up for parole in 2026. So to be continued. She was
interesting.
last up for parole, I think, in 2011, and was denied. I think that at every point the prosecution will say that, like, the reason she's denied is because it's like, I don't think she's caused a lot of trouble while she's been there, but they're like, they don't think that she's reformed because she's never
Remorseful.
really fully accepted what
Yeah.
she's done, or I guess in their eyes been fully repentant for what she's done.
Hmm.
Um
I can see that.
and I guess it depends. We don't know. So I can't throw this guy down the river if he was a good guy. Because we don't know that, right? That's up to them in their bedroom. We weren't there for that. If he was a great guy, then man, this is tough in a different kind of way. If
Right.
he was a terrible guy to her, then also, I mean, I'm not saying that she should be fully repentant. I'm not saying that she didn't
Right.
go overboard, but also, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard
It
to
is what it
know.
is, right? Like she's like, I killed him. I lost it. But I'm not sorry because he was horrible to me.
Right, and if he
Um,
was horrible to her based on her background, then what she did probably wasn't overboard. Now, I will say different psychiatrists have come out to say that she was either delusional, some will say that, or some will say that she's speaking to her like culture, because she will come back to say that she has had visions or felt um a certain kind of way about these, like, ancient Egyptians, which reminder, she was born and raised in Egypt. And per their beliefs, you don't go to the afterlife if your body is not whole. So there has
mm,
been a time when she's said that the reason she dismembered him is so that once she got to the afterlife, she would not meet him there.
okay.
So again, take that for what it's worth, because there was a time she said that she ate his ribs with barbecue sauce and they tasted sweet. And there's a time she said that she does not recall eating him at all. In fact, I think her most current answer on that was, I'm not a monster, good God, I wouldn't have eaten him. But initially speaking, her words were about the barbecue sauce and these. We weren't there. I don't know who's to say what's what, but she also has then come back to say that she dismembered him so that in the event she did make it to the afterlife, he would not be there with her, which would hold up to their culture
Yes.
of
I
belief.
just feel like sometimes she changes. her words or her thoughts or what she has come across
Do you
based off
mean
how
in
she
a
thinks
way
it's
that
going
would
to
not be
favor her.
psychotic?
Well, no, I think in a way that may favor her, either for sympathy and or so that they think she's mentally unsound. Because it sounds way
Too
crazier to say,
sane?
get what right. Well, no, it sounds way crazier, right? To say, oh yeah, it was so sweet. He tasted so sweet. Okay, that's weird. That's crazy. But then later, she wants them to realize that she's not crazy anymore and she wants to be paroled, right? So no, why would I say that? So it almost feels like she goes with whatever she thinks is going to help her at the time.
Well, that's what I mean. She's saying what's not crazy, like that,
Right.
or
Now,
yes,
well,
that
before it might have been
it's
what
too
was
sane
crazy
to be
helped.
crazy to be able to
Right.
articulate all the things, right?
Right. Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Because we hear stories a lot, right? Like women who have abusive husband eventually do snap and kill them. I don't know that they mutilate them. I don't know that they, do all the things that she did to them, but there are instances, probably several, where abusive wives finally just get done and they're like, this is never going to end.
yeah,
So I killed him.
true. Now, I will say it takes a few extra steps to dismember, decapitate,
Yes.
castrate,
Was
skin.
she a big girl?
No, I mean, no, she's not. She's I've not seen her stats, but seeing her pictures, I would say, no, she's not. She's not big at all. She's actually on the shorter side, probably slim. He was
Okay,
like
because you did say she
230.
was a model. Because that's a
Um,
lot of work for a little girl, that it's
yeah,
not easy to
it's a
dismember a
lot of
body.
work for a full-grown man to
Yes.
saw through bones, right? And in fact, one of the accounts is that one of the investigators said this was a clean cut in reference to the decapitation, meaning to the point that they said it seemed so clean that they felt like it couldn't have been a first time job, but we don't have any
Oh,
reason to think she's done it before or any, like, there's no one else on the hook right now that they're thinking like, oh, maybe she was, responsible for this or that.
right.
Meat Potato said maybe multi-personality after she snapped. And maybe I've thought about this earlier. Some of the things I read, her account was so different that it could either be exactly that or what Beth was saying, where she's placating to whoever she's talking to at the time, like whatever would be the best interest for her.
Yeah.
But if you've ever seen uh Sybil, did you ever see that movie Sybil?
I have not.
Beth? Okay,
No.
don't. Um, I've talked about it before on the show, but it was with Sally Fields, and I think I was freshman or sophomore in high school in my psych class. We watched it, and I was not prepared for what I was going to see. But essentially, the movie is based on a true story
Hmm.
of a girl who was abused by her mother, and she was abused to the point where her mother would use instruments inside her to the point that
Oh Lord.
she was not able to bear children once she became an adult, for the amount of scar tissue she had, if you will.
Hmm.
So as a child, this is what she endured, fully conscious, fully aware. But as a coping mechanism, right, her brain took her somewhere else. And so we hear this a lot of times in like systemic rape cases and these kinds of things from early on. So your brain kind of puts you in a different realm, a different like little universe while this is happening. So you can kind of separate yourself from that consciousness. And that can be the start of what we now call DID, dissociative identity disorder, used to be called multiple personality disorder. But so you can kind of like deal with it in the moment.
Right.
Um,
It's a coping
and
mechanism.
exactly. And we all have those. Even in a minor aspect, we all have coping mechanisms. And so with trauma, people can develop bigger ones, which can then lead to bigger consequences or, actions, if you will. So that's a great point. Um, yeah, James and Silly are talking about it. The book and the movie. It's just, well, it's tough. It's really tough. So I will say, which is, if you haven't seen it, see it, but just know it's going to be tough, and you won't ever forget it, and not the greatest way. But either way, it is informative in the sense that that is something that our bodies can do, and it has happened. Like that one movie was not the solo case of this. It's interesting to
Right.
see what our brains can do. So something like this Sure, with what we know happened to her as a child, something like that could have happened. I was not I'm not a psychiatrist, and I definitely wasn't her, so I can't say that, and they didn't
Right.
diagnose her with that, but they did say that she was the psychiatrist that interviewed her, at least for the defense, would say that it was the most kind of messed up situation they had seen, in terms of her responses and things. So, ugh, I don't
Yeah.
know.
You sometimes wish, I don't know if it would be good or bad, but you sometimes wish that these people eventually would just, like, maybe when she's 70 years old and she knows she's never going to get out of jail, she just finally,
Would say
I don't want
it.
to say, well, tells the truth. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
here's
Oh no,
why
I
I
say it
did it.
every week. There are so many times when I'm like, just say it. Like at this point, nothing's going to change. You're not getting out of jail. No one, you know what I mean, is going to think one way or another about you. In fact, we all think this way. Just say it.
Say it,
Yes.
right? Say why, because
Just
we always want to know the why.
yeah.
Why did you do this? So it would be
And
interesting,
and
but
and was he tough on her? Like if he was doing the things she said to him, then get it, girl. Like I'm sorry, but like I don't like if you I know I get, okay, I
But
got
you
to be
can leave.
careful.
You don't have to kill somebody. You can leave. And maybe that was too scary of a prospect for her, because the other
True.
question I had was, I was like, where'd she get $75,000 from? Or was that just BS
It
that
was
she was
his.
going to
No,
get
it
this
was
guy to
his
help
his
her?
car and his money. It was stuff that he had that she was using to barter for helping dispose of his body.
Right. Just take that money and run then. You know what I'm saying? I mean, granted, he'll
Right.
probably try to follow you, but
But I guess I'm
I don't
saying,
know.
like, okay, if what he was doing to her was true, if what she said he was doing to her was true, based on her history, like you're right. Like the answer is to go. You don't kill someone, you go. Like I'm all about
Level
preaching
headed. Level
reciprocal.
headed
Yeah,
says go.
be level headed. Wait on it. Give it a
Go.
second. Just go. But if you have a history of your father holding you down and doing these things to you, and then now you've got this man holding, like, okay, I can't say that like, what's he gonna do good? Like after that, you know what I mean? Like if he's doing what she
Yeah.
said. Now I'm not saying he did what she said. We don't know that. But if he is, I can't say I blame her. I mean, I'll just be honest there, you know what I mean? But also I
Yeah.
can't say that he was doing it. And she went to such lengths. I mean, we're talking wrapping things in tinfoil. All
Yeah.
right. But so
Yeah.
so
Like freezing the head so that she can knock the
freezing
teeth
the
out
heads to
easier.
knock the teeth
I
out
would
later.
never have
We're
thought about
looking at
that.
future planning. So that's where it gets in a different kind of light. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's where this one's weird. It's tough. I mean,
The thought process
uh,
there, like that, it wasn't like she lost it, murdered him, and then just left. Like there was like, okay, so
no.
how do I get away with this now?
Right.
How do I make it so that he just goes missing?
Right. And and it's kind of like I feel like in the past few weeks I've said so many times like, can you be a creep and not a murderer? Sure. And I feel like this week it's more like, can you be a creep but don't need to be the murder victim? Sure. Like maybe, right? Like maybe that's the case. Um I don't know. I
I
feel
don't,
like
and
we're
here's the thing, I don't know that there's like the whole, like I said, the whole thing is a tragedy. Like it's just literally like a domino effect. You know what I mean? For both of them. Like he
yeah.
obviously wasn't a stand-up citizen, otherwise he wouldn't gotten in trouble and gone to prison, so
Yeah.
it seems like their history dictated so much of what may have dictated so much of what happened to them.
Of course. And that's what I think a lot of times the show is about is just like a lesson in every walk of life, right? Like you learn more and more about the human species and about what we do and how our brains work and why they work the way they work and ultimately why it's just good to be nice to people. Just be good to people. Like,
Yes.
you know
Be
what I mean?
kind.
Like if
Yes.
everybody was just good to people, we wouldn't have a lot of this.
Yes. If people would
Um
just smile at each other,
just
maybe the world would be better.
Yeah, we a lot of this wouldn't happen. So, if
Exactly.
at any point in her life that's what was going on with her, I think she could have potentially had a different outcome. Maybe, maybe not, but
Well, I
yeah.
at least hope now she's at peace. Like I know she's in prison, but hopefully there's peace in her life now. Like she's not getting abused. She's not, having to figure out how. to live
Right,
because
not
she's
having
getting
to
three
cut up
square
rib
meals.
bones and separate
Yes,
heads from
yes,
yeah, all
you
the
know,
things.
dissecting a human being. But so, I mean, that may be the one grace for her is that she's got stability where
No,
she's
I
never
agree with
had that
that.
before.
Yeah, I
I
agree
mean,
with
it's
that,
sad
and
stability, but
the
it's still
one thing
stability.
because this is not a case, like I said earlier, that I've researched like I do other ones prior to the show. I don't know much about her family currently, like her mom and dad that were in, Egypt. I assume they're still there. I've not read anything about them coming here. I don't know about her siblings. It would be interesting to know something about the siblings and kind of how their life has gone since then. Um, or just kind of how they would recount things about her,
Right. Mhm.
but it's hard to know when we know her history from early on, like, so it almost kinda wouldn't matter what they said about her early on because we know the other part of her history early. She has
Right.
now, I will say that this is not hearsay, she has the scars to bear, like, to prove, when we
What he
talk
did
about,
to
like,
her, what her father did.
the
Yeah.
yeah, the female, like, um,
Mutilation.
mutilation, yeah, so, that stuff's there and present, so that wasn't, made up or anything like that, so, I don't know, I think that
And I wonder, like, is she you may not know this, but like, if she's the oldest, she may have taken on some of that burden so that the younger siblings wouldn't have to go through that. And
maybe,
so
but I
that's a
think
lot to
that
carry too.
her maybe, but, that was I think she was 6.
Okay.
So, accounts show that she was 6 when that happened, so it's you know what I mean? Meaning that it wasn't like she was, like, 10 or 12 or 14 saying, "I'm gonna do this so they won't have to." She was only 6.
True. Okay.
So, yeah,
It's crazy.
I don't know, but it's a wild case. Either way, she
It's
you know
interesting. It's
yeah,
to say at least it's very interesting.
and I think that arguably, you can't no matter what, she had the most horrible childhood. So
Hmm.
that we know that everybody can have a terrible childhood and grow out of that and have very productive, amazing lives with none of these negative outcomes. So if you are listening, if you've had terrible things, like absolutely this does not mean that you can't go on and have a most amazing, wonderful life. And I've known people who have.
Hmm.
But in cases like this where something bad turns out, you have to take their childhood into account as well, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's just it's
It
something to
shapes you.
think about.
It is.
It does.
There's no way around that. It definitely shapes you.
Absolutely, absolutely. But hey, guys, in the chats, hey, everybody. So look, if you're new to Night Shift with Andrea Up Late in terms of listening, it is a live show that airs on YouTube every Tuesday night at 8, 7 Central on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel. So we have people in chats, like we were saying earlier in the show, like come on board, be in the chats, subscribe to the show, hit subscribe. It's free, y'all. You don't have to pay a thing. It's all free. Trust me. Don't worry about it while you're at it. Hit subscribe to The Bar is Open with Beth and Greg. They've got their own stuff going on over there. It's a lot of fun. They have multiple shows per week at different times. And so I always love to pop on whenever I get a chance as well and be in the
It's
chats
fun
and
when
see
you pop on.
everybody.
We like it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I enjoy it. Y'all are a lot of fun, and so you're always fun to listen to. Beth, always enjoy having I've had both of you on. You and I have not done it solo before, but kind of I like this a
It
lot,
was
so
fun.
we could maybe
Yeah.
do this again.
Absolutely.
If you're willing, yeah, for sure. And so, you guys, please, yeah, like, all the stuff. I say it every week. Hit the download button or subscribe because that way it'll just like kind of continuously happen and you don't have to do it every time. And then it'll tell all the algorithm math gods in podcast world that you listen to the show and that you think it's kind of okay and, whatever. So that would be super helpful and I would appreciate it. And go follow Beth and Greg over at The Bar is Open. And she's, what are you? I always want to say Llama Mama.
The La Mama. Yeah. La Mama
La
oh
Mama.
07, I
La
think, on
Mama.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yes, on Instagram. But look at for the bar is open, and then you can find them from there. And
Absolutely.
they've got merch over at Minor League Studios, and I'm about to have some more merch over there. So if you guys are in the mood for some hoodies or some things, I'll be
It's
getting some of
Christmas
those
time.
out
Great
soon.
gifts.
Yes,
It's almost
exactly,
Christmas time. Yeah.
exactly. Let's see what we got in the chats real quick. We'll address some of you guys. What we got? Leftovers for Thanksgiving dinner. That's one way to put it. Um, the disruptor said Beth and Greg are great. They
Oh,
are.
thank you.
Silly
I
says
do like
nothing.
James's, I
Yeah.
try to have hope for humanity.
Oh, yeah,
I think
right?
that's all of us, yeah.
Just keep trying.
Yeah.
Just keep trying. Silly says nothing surprises me anymore. That's true. True. What y'all got going on? I'm trying to scroll back up because I did not look very much while we were listening.
Because
Um,
you were telling a great story.
man, I get a little distracted. We have Carly in the chats, like I said earlier, James Russell, Teresa K. We had some Bosco. Hey guys, Wagner. All right. Hey y'all. All thanks for tuning in, and we will see y'all not next Tuesday because I will be traveling back from Thanksgiving. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving week. So next Tuesday I'll have off, unless I choose to do some random silly live something or other. Sometimes we do a little bit of something like that. And you can follow us otherwise on IG at Andrea Up Late, and same with the Bars Open with Beth and Greg. And until then, I guess we will see y'all next Tuesday. Thank you,
Happy
Beth.
Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.